Evening and welcome to the Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Planning Board. Pursuant to Senate Bill 2475, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16, 2021, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law C 30A, subsection 18. This meeting of the Shrewsbury Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation found on the town's website at www.shrewsburyma.gov/coronavirus. Members of the public who wish to listen or watch the meeting may do so by visiting https://www.shrewsburymediaconnection.org/. To participate in the Google Meet with video, please contact the Shrewsbury Planning Department at planning@shrewsburyma.gov. A Google Meet link will be sent to you. To participate by phone in the public comment portion of this meeting, dial 1-484-841-5509 and enter the following PIN, 346129-030#. Please mute your device until the chair of the planning board addresses your agenda item or opens the meeting to public comment. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. That said, I will call to order and do a roll call. Please enter in the affirmative if you are here. Mr. Rotalakis.
Present.
Mr. Jerry.
Present.
Mr. Rao.
Present.
Mr. Thomas.
Present.
Mr. Cahill.
Present.
And Mr. Boulay is present as well. Our first item of business is to review and approve minutes. We have minutes from August 5, 2021. Is there any questions or comments relative to the minutes? Mr. Rotalakis.
I wasn't present at the August meeting, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Mr. Jerry.
No comments or questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rao.
No questions or comments.
Okay. Mr. Thomas.
I have no questions or comments.
And I have no questions or comments either. I will entertain a motion. Maybe Tim, you can help us out here.
I'll move that we accept the minutes from the August meeting as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Jerry.
In favor.
Mr. Rao.
In favor.
Mr. Thomas.
I am in favor.
And Mr. Boulay is in favor as well. Our next item of business is to review and sign bills. We have two bills. First one is Graves Engineering, Cypress Avenue Subdivision soil testing for $1,076.05. The second is for Graves Engineering, Greenbriar site plan soil testing, $1,682.10 for the total of $2,758.15. Do I have a motion?
I move that we authorize the expenditures as read by the chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Rotalakis.
In favor.
Mr. Jerry.
In favor.
Mr. Rao.
In favor.
Mr. Thomas.
In favor.
And Mr. Boulay is in favor as well. Our next item of business is to have board member comments. Mr. Rotalakis.
No comments this month, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Jerry.
I have no comments either.
Very good. Mr. Rao.
No comments either, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Thomas.
I also have no comments this month, sir.
I know we're very boring this month. I have no comments either. So I guess we will continue on. Our first item of business is a continued public hearing for Greenbriar Drive Cul-De-Sac definitive subdivision, Cypress Avenue Development Partners LLC. Location is 0 Greenbriar Drive. Do we have an applicant present?
Yes, Barry Atchison from WDA. I may come up on the screen as you. Sorry about that.
I can see you. You're coming up just fine. Okay.
All right, thank
Would
you.
you like to give us a quick overview of where we're at?
Yes, a few months ago, we were in front of you for this definitive plan. It has gone back to, under your recommendation, to go back to Concom, have them take a look at the project. Today, we have gone through that, and today we did receive a order of conditions from Concom for that. Since our last meeting with you folks, we did make some changes that I'd like to go through with you, and then you can give us some comment, questions, and hopefully we can close this thing out. Bernie, is it the double arrow up and then I can take the screen?
Yeah, there should be a little arrow in a box on the bottom right.
A window, share.
Yep, you got it.
All right. This was the plan that we provided in our last meeting. I believe that was beginning of December. A couple of things that one of the big things that we changed is this detention basin. If you recall, there were some questions in regards to the difference in separation of the existing seasonal high groundwater and the bottom of the basin and so forth. We have since gone back, and as you approved tonight for Graves Engineering, we went through and had a few more test pits, witnessed by Graves, witnessed by another hydrologist, and we've made some changes. And if I can pull up the next screen. And that should go. How do I move that? But there we go. This is the plan. Can you all still see that?
No, we have no plan in front of us.
Wow. How about that? No?
Still nothing.
I can put it up.
I was going to say, Bernie, if you want to,
Yep.
do you want to direct Bernie as to what you would like to show? Oh, there's something coming now.
Oh, there it goes.
There we go. Just there we go. This is the plan that we're now presenting in front of you. What we have done is still the layout of the existing cul-de-sac is the exact same length, width, and dimensions as before, providing the 450 some odd feet of frontage for the definitive plan for this future subdevelopment. But what you'll notice a large difference is at the top of the screen, we are planning to be further away from the bordered vegetated wetland, and we do not have a detention basin on the far right-hand side. What we've decided to do, and in conjunction with your recommendation and sight lines from neighboring folks, was to put an island within the center of the cul-de-sac, and that cul-de-sac is a depression with a stone gravel border, a grass following border that falls into a vegetated rain garden. Below that is a large detention basin of gravel and stone. It's roughly 90 feet in diameter. And if I can show you with my arrow, can you see my cursor moving?
I can.
That line there to the center, all the way out to the other side, in below the pavement and so forth, is crushed stone that'll infiltrate any stormwater that accumulates in the detention along the road and so forth. What we've changed on the outside, stay with the town's requirements with a sidewalk, a grass berm sidewalk on the back side as it falls away and ties back into the natural territory. We've classified that with a vegetated mat. It's more of a natural mat that'll allow slow down any kind of runoff from the back of the sidewalk and slow the water down and help infiltrate as it goes down into the existing tie-in. Beyond that, the slope of the road in my next plan. This would be the existing road that is Cypress. We're going to come off the road, slightly go up to a high point, roughly about 50 feet off the road, which is a little bit past where the existing pavement currently is ended when they did the Cypress Road development itself. And then from there, it'll go down at, I'm going to say, roughly a 1 to 1.5% slope all the way down to the middle. And you can see down in here, this little darker spot, I think is where the rain garden. And then it'll go back up to the back side of the cul-de-sac. Per your requests, also, we've decided to put in some additional screening for the house over here. I'm sorry if I don't know the number of it. I think it's 5 or 6 or something like that off the top of my head. But we just put in some screening bushes along in here, some trees around the outside. And then you've got the rain garden itself will have a natural looking territory in it as well. Beyond that, there has not been very much changes.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'll first go around the board. Mr. Rotalakis, any questions or comments with the updated plan?
My only comment is I know this is kind of a precursor to another development plan, but and I'm looking at these conditions. We're doing a subdivision for the purposes of creating frontage. I get it, but so you understand where I'd be coming from. You know, that not to get too far down the road, is that if you had a project that was going to access this subdivision, it would be my intention. It'd be my suggestion that the maintenance of this subdivision be private. You know, dedicated to the condo association. Just so your clients are aware of that. That's
Yes, the intention of this project is to maintain private.
Okay. It's not a big deal now, but expect it. You know, if you're lucky enough to get the special permit, expect it as a condition in the special permit.
Understandable.
Okay.
Anything else, Steve?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Jerry, any questions or comments?
No, I don't have any, Mr. Belay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rao?
No, I don't have any comments. My comments were more or less on the ones that Mr. Rotalakis asked, because I didn't know a lot of the background, but there would be a future development, and at that time, I think we'll get to look at that. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
I have no comments at this point.
Okay, thank you. The only comment I did watch the Conservation Commission meeting that addressed all the issues that you had brought up, and I didn't see it in our decision, but I believe it is in the conservation decision that the maintenance of that rain garden, there's a maintenance plan associated with that. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is a stormwater report that we provided everybody. And within that latest report, which should be dated 1/18/2022, there is a O&M, draft O&M in there.
Very good. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to be heard? And once again, once we get back in town hall, we'll be able to see the hands a little bit better. So I'm going to take it that there are no public comments at this time. So I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing on the Greenbriar Drive definitive subdivision.
Do I have a second?
Second.
In favor, Mr. Rotalakis,
In favor.
Mr. Rao,
In favor.
Mr. Jerry,
In favor.
Mr. Thomas,
In favor.
and Mr. Boulay is in favor. You should have received an updated draft decision that has some highlighted in yellow, some of the changes from the prior draft decision that we had received in our packet. And it had to do with addressing there was a concern or a misunderstanding of driveway pavement. I don't know if Mr. Cahill, you want to briefly explain what that is? I think it's self-explanatory. in the decision,
Yeah,
but-
it was a waiver to provide 1.5 inch thickness on the pavement on the sidewalk and on the road. There's just some confusion over the regulations, and it was a compromise between Andy Truman, our town engineer, Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering, and the applicant. So they came to an agreeable solution, and they recommended approval of the waiver. When I say they, I mean the town engineer and Graves.
Okay. And other than this is a pretty standard decision, obviously with the waiver. I just wanted to mention that I believe in here, we also have a condition that this road will never have the ability to be brought forth for town meeting for a street approval. So I just want to make sure that the applicant is clear on that. Okay. All right. So I guess we should probably look at the waivers first. Does anyone have any questions or comments relative to the waiver for section VB3, VB5, and VC of the subdivision rules and regulations? Mr. Rotalakis.
I'm all set.
Mr. Jerry.
I'm all set as well. Thank you.
Mr. Rao.
I'm all set. No questions, Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Thomas.
I have no questions.
I have no questions on that as well. Do we need to vote on the waiver separately, or can we just include it in the decision?
I think you would include it in the motion.
Very good. Okay, so if there's any other questions, does anybody have any other questions or comments relative to the decision itself? Mr. Rotalakis.
No other questions or comments.
Thank you. Mr. Jerry.
I have no additional questions or comments.
Mr. Rao.
I have no questions, comments either, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Thomas.
I have no further questions or comments.
And I don't either. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we authorize the clerk to execute the decision entitled Decision of the Planning Board regarding 0 Greenbriar Drive definitive subdivision, as well as grant the 4 requested waivers therein.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor. Mr. Rotalakis.
In favor.
Mr. Jerry.
In favor.
Mr. Rao.
In favor.
Mr. Thomas.
In favor.
And Mr. Boulay is in favor as well. Okay. Thank you. And you're good to go. I know there was a question. This is more of a comment area, so the decision's already been voted upon. But there was a concern from a resident that this particular thing not actually be constructed unless we know that the secondary part of this process with the actual subdivision that's going to come off of it. I know you're shaking your head. I just want to make sure that, they're concerned about just having a circle in the back of their yards over there. So we just want to make sure that, we go through the next process before any construction goes. Okay. Does that make sense?
That is, that's what our understanding as well will be is on that.
Very good. Okay. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. Our next item of business is a continued public hearing for South Street Falcon Farms 9-lot subdivision. It's a definitive subdivision. Location is on South Street. Mr. Cahill, I believe you said that this applicant has requested a continuance.
Yeah, it was too late to put in your hard copy packets for the week, but it is online on the website. Sorry, in your shared drive to request a continuance to March 3rd.
Just, do you know if anyone is present in this meeting for this? From
No,
that,
they wouldn't. They asked. Well, didn't ask. They said they wouldn't be present, but they did submit a signed continuance request.
that's okay.
And just for the record, they the applicant changed engineering firms, and they've made some progress with my understanding is DEP and the Conservation Commission. So they are kind of doing a reworking of that whole crossing. So we're going to see that, from what I understand from the applicant, as early as next month. So they are making progress, and I think it's going to be a lot cleaner for this board. There should be fewer waivers involved because they're now going to be able to meet a lot of the things they're asking to waive. So,
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I'm wondering, because the site looks like it's going to change dramatically, and the amount of correspondence that was going back and forth from this has been going on for nearly a year now. What can we do to ask the applicant so that we can not muddy the decision with having information that's technically not going to be relevant to the site because the site plan is changing that dramatically?
the one option, I mean, we can't make anyone do anything, but the board can request that the applicant consider reapplying under a new application with the consideration of perhaps waiving some of the technical review fees, perhaps.
Yeah.
Something we could certainly discuss with them. That's not to say it wouldn't have to go to Graves Engineering, but perhaps if it's cleaner, it may not need to get spend quite as much time with Graves, if that makes sense. So
yeah. How does the rest of the board feel about something like that? Maybe asking the applicant to help us.
I can certainly ask, Mr. Chairman. I can certainly ask.
Mr. Rotalakis, any questions or comments relative to that, or?
My only concern is that what actually varies with what is on the ground today was not reflected in the.
I lost you, Steve.
You're cutting out, Steve.
What I said
No.
was, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Thanks.
Breaking in and out, but go ahead, try again.
My concern was that what existed on the ground out there right now was not reflected in the subdivision plans that were submitted. We found out that, the crossing had been expanded. And so, it seemed like he was backfilling quite a bit. So if we start with a new definitive subdivision application, I'm not suggesting you go to a preliminary and have someone verify exactly what's on the ground there. I think would be helpful.
So you think, to take that a step further, it'd be almost like withdrawing this application without prejudice and just submitting a new subdivision, because this bridge crossing, from what I understood from the conservation, is going to adopt as closely as possible to our current subdivision rules and regulations.
That's my understanding.
That's what I would suggest.
All right, so maybe does anybody else have any questions or comments relative to asking the developer to consider doing that? I think it's just going to make it a little cleaner, but again, to Mr. Kayla's point, we can't force them. So, Mr. Jerry.
I think that's a very reasonable request, particularly in light of how long that's gone on. And if there's material changes to this project, it's going to require the town and any third-party consultants to do their work all over again. So I don't think it's unreasonable for him to have to go through the process for what's essentially a completely new plan.
Okay, Mr. Rao.
I do agree with Mr. Jerry and Mr. Rotalakis that it would be a cleaner process, and I think it might even help the applicant in a way that it doesn't have all this background change of engineers. If we were to go with the current submittal, there'll be 2 engineers and a lot of confusion and all that. So I think if we can present it to the applicant, that it would be cleaner both for him and for the planning board in decision making, I think he may very likely go with that approach, I think. But again, as Mr. Cahill said, we can suggest, probably we may not make him do, but I think if we indicate that it would be cleaner for the decision making process too, it might go very well with that side.
Very good. Mr. Thomas.
Just to echo everyone's sentiments, I think everyone brings up good points of why the applicant should do it. I think suggesting this to him, I think, is in the best interest of us and the applicant. So I think it makes the most sense to do it that way for him and for us.
Okay. So maybe what we can do
Chairman?
is, sure, Mr. Rodriguez.
Bernie, without spoiling the surprise, I haven't seen any conceptual plan. Can you give us an idea as to how many lots the applicant will be looking for?
I don't know in the new design if it's going to be the same or less or more. So I'm in the same boat as you. We're gonna have to wait and see. But I can certainly reach out on behalf of the board and ask that the applicant consider and say that the board is encouraging the applicant to do this and that it would be viewed, favorably to do it in this manner, and see what he says.
Well, if he's going to propose a bridge that's going to conform to our subdivision standards in order to get the extra lots, that's going to cost him a fortune, which is okay. But I don't want to hear, because of the expense of the bridge, that he's going to be looking for a waiver of the affordability bylaw, because I foresee that.
Yeah, I mean, the applicant's aware. We've had long discussions about that. I forget now at this point. It's been 4 or 5 months at least since we talked. Maybe 6 months actually. I think it was last summer we last talked about it. But the applicant did tell me his intent was to go for a special permit for a fee in lieu. So as of if this is approved, say in a couple months, without a special permit, then at that time it's all understood that he has to actually include one, like actually build an affordable unit. However, he does have that option to come in and apply for a special permit. Doesn't mean it will be granted by this board, but he has the right to do that. So in other words, he'd still pay if the board were to accept that special permit something, but not provide the unit. But again, that would be at this board's discretion. But he is aware. We had lots of discussion last June and July about exactly this topic. So,
but that's when he was going to use something that resembled the existing crossing. Now
sorry, go ahead.
Pretty significant. This is a pretty significant crossing if it's going to comply with subdivision standards.
Right.
2 sidewalks.
We can't stop him. We can't stop him from asking for a waiver, but he also, to not do anything at all, according to our zoning bylaw, he has to meet certain dimensional requirements, which I don't believe these lots meet. So I think that's ruled out to even ask for that special permit to waive anything at all. So he's either going to have to put a unit in or request a special permit for a fee in lieu, land in lieu, or a offsite unit or 2 in lieu. So those will probably be the 3 choices. But I mean, that's a calculation of, the applicants themselves have to make if the expense is too much. So,
I know, but we've been dealing with this for a while, and it's, and we're kind of shooting in the dark because we don't know what he's going to propose.
Yeah.
But it is like a game of concentration, trying to, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right, so maybe we can do is when we make the motion to continue this to our next meeting, is maybe to recommend the planner reach out to the applicant for consideration of withdrawing without prejudice so that he can resubmit with his new plan, whatever that might be.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we grant the applicant's request to continue the public hearing on the South Street Falcon Farms definitive subdivision plan until Thursday, March 3rd at 7 p.m., as well as a encouragement to the applicant that he consider withdrawing this and withdrawing this subdivision without prejudice and resubmitting a new subdivision plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor. Mr. Rotalakis.
In favor.
Mr. Jerry.
In favor.
Mr. Rao,
In favor.
Mr. Thomas,
In favor.
and Mr. Boulay is in favor as well. Okay, so that moves on. That takes care of all of our open hearings and meetings for this evening. Next item of business is for new business. So the first item is to discuss and vote on upcoming zoning warrant articles for annual town meeting. Mr. Cahill.
Right, so by now you should all be familiar with this. This is our annual request, or the board's annual request for zoning articles for annual town meeting to the selectmen to have them put on the warrant for consideration. And this comes first before the planning board has its public hearings. Also, pretty standard is the language for some of these is still under development. So we are working on it, but I will do my best here to explain the 5 articles we're proposing. So the first one is we're looking to introduce language into section 2 of the zoning bylaw to allow the town clerk to make administrative non-substantive changes, numerical or alphabetic, to the zoning. So right now, if we want to so for example, over time, as we do amendments, things get changed around, things get overlooked. Some, it might be in an order A, B, C, F, and somehow D and E got missed and the clerk has to change that. Or maybe one of the footnotes is out of order or out of whack number wise, or something got renumbered in the wrong way. Currently, we have to go to town meeting to get those changed, which seems excessive. So several towns have this for both their general bylaw and their zoning bylaw, where it just empowers the town clerk to make those little administrative changes to make all the numbers line up. Like, it's that simple. So really, that's all we're asking. It's not substantive. Some of the language will say, they have to report and run it by Stephen Madaus. They have to, or town council Stephen Madaus, or they have to keep track of what they changed and put it away somewhere, and mark and date what they changed for that. But that's the first one. So I don't want to belabor that one. The second one is that a hand? Yes, Perna, go ahead.
I was wondering if you were able to check with the town council if that kind of a change can be made administratively without having to go to the town meeting, if it's entertainable at all.
Well, Perna, I will be straight with you. It was actually Attorney Madaus who recommended it.
Okay,
It was at his
great.
suggestion, because we were doing the last one from special town meeting in the fall, and we realized certain things were out of whack. They weren't lining up the numbers with the table of contents. But to change that and to make them correct, it would require town meeting. And I just feel like town meeting members and the town as a whole have better things to do than renumber some zoning articles, which the substance is not going to change.
Yeah.
And it's been well founded, and the AG has approved it in other towns, so it's practice. But it's a good question. But it was actually when we came to Attorney Madaus with that question, he said, you could make an article for that and actually give the clerk the power to do these changes. So, but good question. Good question.
Thank you.
We're way ahead of you. Or I should say Attorney Madaus is. Okay, so the next one is something Assistant Town Planner Ron McAllister has been working on also with Attorney Madaus Town Council to fine-tune Section 4B, which is existing non-conforming uses, to better reflect state statute and recent case law. So Section 4B, for those of you who don't know, is kind of the section that rules over most of what the Zoning Board of Appeals does for special permits. We're just trying to make it, the planning department and town council, we're working together to just try to make it makes better sense based on what we understand in Chapter 40A. So that language is being worked out mostly between the assistant town planner and town council. I will have language for you at the next one. Actually, for all of these is the intent at the next meeting, although we won't be discussing it till April, but hopefully by then you'll have something to review. But again, it's to make it match better with current case law and also with 40A. So any questions about that one? I'll stop. Okay, I will move on. The next one is, I think some of you might be familiar with this topic. This has been circulating for a few years now, but is to consider creating a zoning article that would trigger site plan approval for slopes that are created. So not slopes just found in nature, but actually, cut out of a side of a hill or created in whatever way of a certain height and of a certain grade. So anything steeper than like a 2-to-1 slope, for example, at a certain height would trigger site plan approval. I think this board in particular, over the last few years, has seen for yourselves without review what trouble this can lead to in town. And the tighter and tighter we're getting with lots, builders are being, developers are being more creative, getting in there with steeper slopes. This would add some level of review. So we could send out, so let's say, I'm not going to mention any sites, but let's say there's another slope that's 20 feet high and a 1-to-1 slope being put in somewhere commercial or residential. It would go to site plan review to this board, and we could send it out to technical review to a geotechnical engineer to review it to make sure that it's a sound design. And also it would give this board some pushback as well if we thought it wasn't a sound design. So any questions about that one? All right. The next one is to take a look at this article, to take a look at screening requirements in the limited industrial zoning district. Before I say anything else, this is not screening between limited industrial and residential zones or uses. It would be strictly to look at the screening requirements from one industrial lot and between that and another industrial lot next door. So we have currently screening requirements. It does cause a lot of frustration for enforcement. And it's also been called into question about the necessity of it. So, I mean, if you have a contractor's yard next to another contractor's yard or a loading dock, do we really need 15, 20 feet of screening between those two uses? Who's, the benefit of that and the usefulness of that is not always understood. If you've been down Route 20, and this is mostly Route 20 we're talking about, you'd see what I mean about having to be the different industrial lots. Again, I can't reiterate enough, this wouldn't impact any change between limited industrial and residential, any residential uses. All that would stay the same. Any questions about that one? All right, not hearing any. Number 5, so this is our last one. I don't know how many of you remember, this came up, what kind of trigger this was 334 Grafton Street, that garage behind Home Depot. So currently, this is to modify common driveways, dimensional and use requirements. So currently, the way it's set up is the dimensions of the common driveway are based on what zone it's in, the common driveway, and not what use is using it. So as we saw there, the common driveway went through a residential zone, and where the common driveway stopped at the property line, it became a non-residential zone and became a non-residential use. But both of those, they kind of not contradict each other, but the more intense use, luckily the applicant was reasonable enough to not push back when fire pointed that out and said, well, we need the 20 feet for commercial use, and our zoning says for a commercial zone it's 20 feet. So what we're looking to do is change it to use instead of by zone, and maybe take a look at a couple other things for number of uses and so on like that. So I think it makes pretty good sense to go by use instead of zone, but I'd love to hear any comments.
Now, we have a bylaw in town that says that commercial or industrial sites can't be accessed through a residential zone. I think it's in our bylaw.
Steve, did you say can't be accessed?
Cannot.
I'll double check that because I think that would have come up for this site. Because this common driveway did service, thought it serviced the residences or could service the residences. I'll double check. I can double check all of it when we go through it. And keep in mind too, if we run into something, this isn't the end all and be all. If we decide in March or April we can do this, we can do that too. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Steve, I'll make a note.
It's kind of related, but
yeah, definitely.
But you might want to look at that. I think that's within our zoning bylaw.
Yeah. I'll double check that. All right. So I guess if you don't have any other questions, what I would ask is that the board take a vote. I gave somebody the wording for it. Make a motion to request that the planning director submit a zoning article request letter to the Board of Selectmen as presented tonight.
I move that we direct Mr. Cahill to submit a zoning report to the selectmen consistent with what was discussed this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Rotalakis,
In favor.
Mr. Jerry,
In favor.
Mr. Rao,
In favor.
Mr. Thomas,
In favor.
Mr. Boulay is in favor as well. Okay. Our next item of business is to review and endorse the endorsement of the Shrewsbury 2016 Master Plan update. I know it was several pages thick. This is basically just the update as to activities that have been ongoing or things that might be completed. Does anybody have any questions or comments of the materials inside? Mr. Rotalakis,
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Mr. Jerry,
I'm all set as well.
Mr. Rao,
I am all set. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas,
I'm all set. Thank you.
and I am all set too. Jay, do you want to do a motion for this one for me, please?
Yes, I move that we accept the changes as presented to the planning board with the updated November 2021
Master plan.
master plan that was presented.
I do have a second.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Rotalakis,
In favor.
Mr. Jerry,
In favor.
Mr. Rao,
In favor.
Mr. Thomas,
In favor.
and Mr. Boulay is in favor as well.
And that master plan update, just Mr. Chairman, so people watching know, will be uploaded to the website. If not tomorrow, then Monday.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cahill. Our next item of business is to discuss and have feedback for the Community Preservation Committee plan. With us tonight, we have the chairman of the CPC, Mr. Jason Molina, present to help us if there's any questions or comments relative to what we're going to have a discussion about now. And also, I'd ask him to do some closing comments once we've finished doing our section of this. So what I thought would be a good idea is to kind of give you some highlights as to what CPC has been working on. As many people know, 2020 town meeting approved the citizens petition warrant to accept Community Preservation Act. Since then, in 2021, town meeting approved the creation of the Community Preservation bylaw and the Community Preservation Committee, of which we've been meeting since I think November of last year, pretty much every month. Currently working on what's defined as the CPC plan. That's currently under draft, and I believe Mr. Molina, we'll be discussing that. It's next Monday is our next meeting to discuss the updates we have from the prior meeting. So that's getting closer, but part of that plan requires select boards and committees to offer some insight and suggestions as to where CPC should be looking in terms of the 4 areas that CPC governs, which is under historic preservation, affordable housing, open space protection, and outdoor recreation. So that being said, I think this would be much easier to do in person because we can kind of do a roundtable and kind of work off of each other's thoughts and ideas. So in an effort to try to help move this along a little bit, rather than me taking a particular item and asking each individual questions about it, I think if we use the hand signal that's on the bottom of the screen for you, and just if you come up with an idea or whatever, if you could raise your hand, and then we have Emily is going to be documenting all of our thoughts and ideas of what we're going to cover tonight. So we don't have to worry about taking notes about it. It's being done for us. And then we can allow that to flow through to the CPC as help for them. I should have said, I'm actually the member designate for the planning board currently. and there's other members from other boards and committees that'll have the same conversation with their boards and committees too. So I think what would be easiest to do is just take them one at a time and just have a kind of a discussion as to what we think you would think would be something as a basically under, I'm more focused on the community needs side of things. I think the key existing resources, we have a fairly substantial listing, such as like the housing production plan and master plan. There's a number of documents that are already associated with this that are defined. Unless you can think of something that is a key resource that you just want to bring up, it's perfectly fine to do that too. Keeping in mind, this is a kind of a brainstorming thing, so there's nothing off the table as to what can be done. Just because it's brought up doesn't mean it will be acted upon or thought of, because there are some kind of guidelines, restrictions that CPC funds can be used for. So if we take the first one, which is, say, historic preservation, for an example, what I would throw out there is, we've got a number of historic markers that are located. I tried to go downtown earlier this week, and I didn't get a chance to look it out. But I can remember as a kid, I would go by the library, and there used to be a monument there for when General Knox took the cannons from Ticonderoga, and it was there. And I don't know if it still is, if anybody knows that it's moved, but things of that nature to maybe restore that. And in line with that, also coming up with some wayfinder signs, like, so certain things are in this kind of direction, and way signs can be used for a number of different things, like access to where the walking trails are and things of that nature. So that's kind of what I was thinking as under historic preservation, just off the top of my head. So if anybody would like to maybe jump in and maybe throw another idea or two out that we think would be a good community need. Oh, Mr. Thomas, you have raised your hand.
I think another good thing for historical preservation would be like a wayfaring sign for, let's say, Adams Ward House, because that's our most popular historical thing we have in town, I would say. Or I'm reading a thing online the other day about people were debating on where the oldest house in town was. I think that's also a good thing. I think people would be interested in seeing things like that. Even people who have been in town forever don't necessarily know what the oldest house in town is. I didn't, so I've lived here my whole life. So I think that stands out to me as something that could be useful.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas relative to historic preservation? I'd like to give at least one more on that. Maybe, and I'm not sure if the Historic Commission maybe already have this task, but it might be something for us to do. I know the town just got a report for historic properties in town. I think it got completed last year. And I'm wondering if it would make sense. Like, I was just in Newport not long ago, and there's a lot of houses on there that have, like, it's obviously a very historic district down in the Newport area, and they've got the names of the houses, and maybe we can do something with historic, maybe a backstory. So when you're driving down the road, sometimes you see the markers that are on the side of the road. I know I'm kind of a nerd. I stop and read them every once in a while, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for, certainly, Artemis Ward House is certainly one of the most famous ones that we have, right? But I'm sure there are several others that this report may have discovered. Yeah, Mr. Cahill.
Yeah, I think you and Mr. Thomas are onto something, Mr. Chairman. Just to expand on that further, so when you're looking at like a need, I think something like this would be great. Would be just I think if I was writing it down, it would be like better communications about locations of landmarks and historical sites in Shrewsbury, right? Whether that's a flyer. I know these days they have like a little electronic, little apps you can put on like your phone. It's like a little tour guide, like you're in a museum, but you're driving around town, right? And it can be like, next stop, Artemis House, 2 miles this way. Right? And you kind of run around like GPS, whatever. And so I think that's kind of a great example of like a need. Like, we just need better communication generally, or better, about where these things are to everyone, visitors or residents alike. So that's a good need, both of you. I think that's really great. I think that's the right type of thing we're looking for feedback.
Okay. Is there anybody else that have anything relative to historic preservation. Keeping in mind that if something comes to mind later after this meeting concludes, certainly can send an email to either Rowan or Bernie to any other thoughts or ideas, and they can be encapsulated in the document that Emily's going to be constructing for the CPC. Okay. All right, we can skip to the next one, affordable housing. It's obvious that we are constantly under, 40B barrage for our inability to get above the 10%. I know that we try to get more affordable housing as much as we can in the site plans that we get, but we're kind of restricted to what the rules allow for that. I don't know if maybe this would be a very large project. So currently there's I believe it's housing development has the building that's on North Quinsiga. Steve, is that a full housing development project so that everything in there is affordable? Do you know offhand?
Which one on North Quinsiga?
The one that Mel used to live in.
The towers?
Oh,
Yeah.
Is
that Shrewsbury Housing Development?
That's Housing Authority. That's the
Housing Authority.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, would it make sense to maybe look into constructing? Now, there's quite a few units there, and I believe every one of those is affordable, correct?
I believe everyone is, yes.
So I know that'd be kind of a lofty goal, but I think maybe helping get that housing inventory up might be something to consider.
Well, I think everybody in there receives some sort of housing subsidy. So, that may be different than, affordable under what for the 40B guideline. I'm not sure that every unit there is part of the considered what, the DHCD considers, affordable housing stock. I would assume it is, but that's a good point. Looks like there might be some opportunity for additional density over there.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe even expanding on what already may have,
Doesn't have to be a high rise, maybe something, akin to what's on South Quinsigamon Ave, off of South Quinsigamon Avenue near, near Napoli, some housing like that.
Yeah. Those houses went up there a few years back, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What, does anybody else have any,
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
That's a good need and a goal, right? Like to maximize or use existing resources to leverage those to create more, right? Create more density. That also reminds me of our good friend, Mr. Gordon, is I know something that always came up when we were talking about town center rezoning was the lack of senior affordable housing. So specifically for that age group, because they get, many seniors, I should say correctly, when they retire, they don't have necessarily massive salaries or incomes, but they don't want to leave their families behind, right? They don't want to go somewhere else out of state or out of town. So that is definitely a need, I would say right there, which I think you guys were kind of dancing around, but I think that's definitely a need that I think I'll just infer from what you said.
Yeah. Well, I do know because I had done a little bit of research that the population percentage of the 65 and older has grown in the past couple of decades, certainly since the last census, not the 2020, the prior one, which obviously would play into this, trying to come up with something for the affordable housing in general, but seniors in particular. Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas around affordable housing? Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
I think a good start for us or for the CPC in general is to find out what the Shrewsbury Housing Authority has for inventory as far as land, and then being able to see what the committee could do with the land that is already owned by the Housing Authority to be able to do something with these projects like you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts or ideas? Mr. Verdelikis.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would end up collaborating these two committees, that Shrewsbury Housing Authority and this Community Preservation Committee would end up collaborating, but there's got to be a way.
Yeah, there is. There's a representative from the Shrewsbury Housing Authority on CPC, so that to help, that at least that has that connection to bridge the two groups.
But it's more the funding.
I can ask Jason this, Mr. Molina. The funding for CPC, it does not have to be 100%, right? CPC, because we never really got into this in that great a detail. It can be commingled funding, correct?
Right. The project does not have to be 100% CPA monies. It can be, and often is, leverage other monies to make a project happen. And so CPC is a clearinghouse for funding project requests. So it really would be up to whether it be town entities or external entities like nonprofits to create a building as an example. And so there's a lot of coordination to make this happen. But CPC again is really looking at from a funding perspective, being able to give monies there. You also have the opportunity to leverage the Affordable Housing Trust, which is also brand new as well, to bring monies to that group and have them look at it holistically, saying if we pull in the money that your developers have sent money into that trust, along with CPA monies, could help make a larger project happen. So a lot of opportunity here.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next one, which is open space protection. I know for certain that that's always a kind of a hot button topic around town, is trying to preserve as much space as we can. And in terms of, well, the one I wanted to use is actually for the next one. So I'm going to say maybe something like this, if we can find some open space that maybe it can be used more in a passive type of environment. It's, maybe coming up with whether they're benches or, making it a very serene type of a location that instead of it just being a plot of land that, first of all, there'll be access to it. So maybe walkways or things of that nature. And, something like that. I'm describing it very poorly, but I was kind of hoping maybe somebody could take what I'm thinking and make a better idea out of it. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas around open space? Yeah, Mr. Thomas. Oops. I'm sorry, Mr. Rolikis. I thought Jay were reaching for your button. Yeah. So go ahead, Mr. Rolikis.
Well, obviously, you get more bang for your buck if you're buying development rights, but that probably doesn't achieve the goal of creating access. But it does, I guess from a visually or, preserving the scenic or historic nature and just aesthetically, it works, but it doesn't necessarily provide public access. But it's better than buying. Well, it provides you more bang from your buck in terms of buying the entire thing.
Okay. Thank you. It just reminded me of one of the limitations that CPA money cannot be used for is for maintenance activities. So you can do restoration, you can do improvement, but long-term maintenance is not eligible for CPA money. So kind of gets a little dicey, and depending on what projects you may get involved in, but we're well aware of what can and cannot be funded at that point. All right, why don't we move to the next one, which is outdoor recreation.
Mr. Chairman, I believe
yes.
You still had a couple people turn it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss hands?
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Rao.
I don't know if this is relevant. There's a graphic in the handout that says Community Preservation Committee, and I'm not sure if it is for our town. But in terms of the minimum allocation, they have combined open space and recreation for 10%. Even though our goals are 4, I would say that probably each one of those should be 10%. If this is just as a demonstration graphic, it's okay. But if this is the way it's going to be kind of divvied up, I think open space and outdoor recreation are taking a cut. Jointly, they are 10% instead of each one being a 10%, All
right. Mr. Molina, would you like to explain a little bit of how this is currently set up?
Yes, no problem. Thank you. So that's not something that we can control locally. Chapter 44B, Master General Law, defined how monies are supposed to be allocated. And so I think the backstory here is that a lot of people get confused between open space and recreation, and oftentimes it gets commingled. Even in the conversation as Mr. Boulay was talking about the open space in Serene, when talking about the walking aspect of it and having benches, we've now crossed over to the passive recreation side. So because of that, the nuances between open space and recreation often kind of go hand in hand. My personal adjustment view of this is that I think the authors of Chapter 44B saw that it really is, it can be playing both sides of it. And so all they say is that at minimum, you're putting 10% for open space and recreation as a funding bucket together. Historical preservation and affordable housing is another 10. But it doesn't prevent the CPC from moving forward on recommending a project that exceeds that 10% in a particular year. So these are just minimums to make sure that every group gets a little bit of the action. But it really is going to depend on the year and the number of projects that are coming through and what they're asking for. One year may be a lot on affordable housing. Another year may be a lot for open space and recreation, and some kind of variation there. So. I think we're just trying to make sure that every one of the stakeholders that helped create the act felt buy-in, so they can support it and then bring it to their towns to adopt it.
Good, thank you for that explanation. Is there any other questions? Jay, is this on open space? Actually, we might as well combine the two of them, open space and recreation, because they are so closely related. Yep, you're on mute there, Mr. Thomas.
Being on the Open Space and Recreation Committee that we had a year or so ago, one of the big things was access to these things that we have, whether it be parking or signage or, like Bernie was saying, some sort of, an app to say where, there's a lot of open space and recreational areas that people don't know about in town because there's no signage for them, there's no parking for them. So I think access to these different places that we have in town and giving people the knowledge to know where they are is a huge thing that would get people to use them more. They could be in your backyard and you wouldn't even know it. That's one of the huge things that we found on that Open Space and Recreation Committee we had when we paneled people from town, is they don't know where it is or how to get there or where to park when they get there.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you. One of the ideas that I had in many travels around the country, and this one example comes from an area that has a generous amount of space, so I'm not certain that this would even be something that we could entertain, but maybe it's reevaluating what we have for our non-passive recreation areas, such as, I'm just going to throw it, don't take this wrong, everybody, but if, say you had Dean Park, right? It's one of our largest parks and largest open space areas. Maybe re-looking at how that is currently being used. And I can tell you that skate parks seem to have a large presence in other areas of the country, and believe it or not, as the aging population gets there, as I said before, our population is aging too. Pickleball courts are becoming all the rage, and whether or not that's something that we could utilize inside of our already existing resources of that non-passive type of recreation use. So I was kind of thinking about something like that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or additional comments for Mr. Rotalakis?
To me, the most obvious one is Ward Hill, which is owned by, private individual, private family, leased to an operator. I would hate to see that. These ski hills, there used to be hundreds of them. I think where you grew up in Marlboro,
Jericho Hill.
There was one, Jericho Hill.
Yeah.
That was operated by the LaCroix family. It's part of it. I don't know how many are left in New England, but it is part of the New England antiquity. And it would be a sin to see that property developed, meaning it, in a way, without retaining the ski hill.
Yep, that's a good point. Thank you.
Steve, how would you rephrase that as a need? It's like a game show. Put it in the terms of a need. So the need to preserve existing, currently privately held open space, something like that. Like that's how I try to frame it, I think.
again,
Yeah.
maybe you could preserve you could purchase the development rights.
That kind
It
of,
is.
yeah, that goes back to what you were saying earlier. I think the need would then, what you and Jay were getting at, and maybe even Steve, Mr. Chairman, was getting at, is the need to figure out and determine, like, what are the options, right? Like, just what are the options, right? Because maybe we don't know what those options are. So that's something the CPC could do, right? Pull a bullet list together of, here are options: conservation restrictions, something about right of first refusal, some sort of other easements, things that we could do and have those readily accessible. Because I think that's what the three of you are getting at, is that would be the need there. Is let's figure out what we can do. And then
I don't think it's something the town wants to own and operate. Okay.
No, not necessarily.
I see that being disastrous. But however, I think that looking at this, it is a scenic vista when you're driving down Main Street. It is beautiful, all seasons. It really is, and it'd be a sin to lose it. I just want, it'd be, and I'm not suggesting that maybe the development of the maybe there couldn't be some further development. Maybe maybe the property could be further developed. However, preserving that hill, I think, but certainly it has historic characteristics. It almost checks every box of the four boxes.
Yeah, I think that's a good need. That's a good one.
I'm not sure if we have the financial resources at this point to tackle that, though.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, we're just kind of brainstorming ideas, and this is just one activity part of CPC. We're not actually going to be personally submitting an application, but these are ideas that the CPC plan is going to try to align so that when the public forums begin and things of that nature, we can kind of consolidate ideas and find out where, there could be some that are very quick wins and there's some that are very long-term strategies that need to be developed for. Again, this is kind of just an idea brainstorm session, basically. Does anybody else? Oh, Mr. Molina.
Just wanted to quickly say that CPA monies are predictable and can be bonded. So if there was a project proposal that was in excess of what the current balances are in the reserves, if there was a willingness between the project proponent, the CPC, and then town meeting ultimately approving it, we could, and obviously we would have to work through the town because it's a bond, but that is an extraordinary opportunity if a project were to come up like that.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to my attention. It was part of one of the notes that I was going to mention. So currently, what's anticipated in the CPC account at the end of fiscal 2022, which is the end of June, is we're expecting about $789,000. So the money will start to grow because it's a recurring revenue. And unfortunately, this particular year, we will not get funding matched by the state. However, future years will have the ability to get matching. And I can't remember the exact number, Jason, but I think it's somewhere between 30 to mid 30% match, somewhere thereabouts. Do you recall?
It's going to vary based on the number of transactions at the Registry of Deeds in that particular year, but you can figure about 25 to 35% in that range. Yep. Okay. For the monies that we contributed, if that's 700,000 plus.
Right. Yeah. Not counting the 700, the future. Right. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. All right. Any other discussion around open space and outdoor recreation? Okay, not seeing any. I think we've given a few ideas out there. We'll get that all consolidated for you, Mr. Molina. Bernie.
Just before you close out the meeting and we say goodbye for the evening, just for anyone watching at home, if you've been watching and thinking you have an idea for a need, that's something we need in town, whatever it is, in one of those four categories, whether it's housing, affordable housing, open space, recreation, or I always forget the last one. Whatever the last one was.
Historic preservation.
Historic preservation, thank you. There's always one I forget. If you have any thoughts about those needs, you will have an opportunity. We are aiming for an April public forum.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
We are hoping, I don't know, maybe Steve, you're going to plug it, but I'll plug it. We are looking to get library space. So we're hoping early April, kind of before town meeting season really gets underway. So if you are not on a board or committee and the CPC is not coming to your house, you can come to our house. You can meet us at the library. We are hoping we'll be back in person, be able to do this, but you can come and voice your thoughts about it and we can get your needs down and CPC will incorporate that into their final plan. So stay aware and we will be advertising that pretty heavily. So look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
You're welcome. So, Mr. Molina, I was going to still offer you the opportunity for some final comments. And obviously, you can reiterate what Mr. Cahill said about it's not defined at the moment. I know we'll probably have that as maybe an agenda item at our next meeting for when public forums will be scheduled and so forth. But if you want to add any other final comments.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Mr. Cahill, thank you for the plug on that. It's clearly one of the biggest things that we look forward to, having as a public comment on the needs of the community. I think that in my personal view, what really excites me about CPA is the fact that there's always been ideas about what could be done in a town, but never funding to be able to do it. And now's our chance to finally be able to say, okay, let's move forward on those ideas. And so as you had an earlier agenda item about the master plan update, there's chock full of ideas in there, always ideas, but funding always a problem. So again, finally, CPA is available to start chipping away at those ideas, the ones that have good merit and great opportunity for many in our community. And I love hearing the opportunities that you all had brought forward here tonight. We will be going to other boards and committees to hear from them. Some of them are required members from CPC, and others we'll be hearing to hear additional fullness from the community. So, and this is an annual process. So we'll be back again and hearing the newest ideas as that time comes up. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Molina. Okay, I believe that's all I have on our agenda item. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we conclude this evening's public hearings.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Rotalakis,
In favor.
Mr. Jerry,
In favor.
Mr. Rao,
In favor.
Mr. Thomas,
In favor.
and Mr. Boulay is in favor. Thank you all and have a wonderful night and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.